Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Getting ready for the silly season. We sure are. But before any silly season happens, we have with us today Guy Anderson, who really is an expert on topics like Tartaria, the Cabbage Patch Kids, cloning. I've watched some of your stuff on cloning, Guy. It's very, very interesting. So, how are you? Well, before we go there, how are you? Welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Very busy at the moment with my new book, which came out at the start of the month, so I'm flat out with that. But yeah, very well, thank you. How are you?
Also great, thank you. Wonderful. The warm weather's creeping in. But your new book, tell us about that.
It's based on my blogs, my website blogs, and my posts. Every day I put a post up on Facebook, and it's a different rabbit hole. And I put them all together in alphabetical order and expanded upon them, and there it is. So
I love
that's
it.
that's my latest one.
Conspiracy theories from Agatha to zombies. I love that. We're going to have all your links and details in the description area so the viewers can follow you, do whatever. We'll have your links for your books in there as well so they can check that out. That's amazing. Well done. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
People
you.
just kept asking me if I was going to well, when I put these posts up, people were asking whether or not they were part of a book. And I thought, well, I could do an alphabetical order, if you like, summary of every single conspiracy that's captured my imagination over the last sort of 20, 30 years and get it printed and it's flying off the shelf. So it's a bit
Well,
of fun.
tell us about, well, why don't we start with what your favorite conspiracy is? And why don't we kick off our series with that? Because I definitely would like to have you for more than one show, for sure. There's so much we can talk about. But why don't we start with what your favorite conspiracy is that you've worked on or that you've encountered,
It has to be Tartaria.
right?
Because if you are capable of wiping out an entire civilization from our history books, then that has to be not only the biggest conspiracy of them all, but the biggest effort. The people that were involved, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. It's called the Powell Doctrine, the Powell Doctrine, and that was the agreement put in place for the Jesuits and the Freemasons and other organizations and societies to actually go out there into the big wide world and remove everything, absolutely everything, atlases, books, maps, um, uh, redating uh, artwork, buildings, manuscripts, everything was completely doctored to falsify not only our history, but also the timeline too. Um,
Right.
so it's, by far, to be able to do that, I think is perhaps the most magnificent conspiracy theory.
I watched maybe 2 to 3 years ago now. I think it's called The Lost History of the Flat Earth, where I was first introduced to Tartaria. And what a fascinating, I want to say topic, but it goes way beyond a topic. Because, I mean, Tartaria is just a whole different world,
Mm.
civilization, right? I mean, the buildings we're seeing, all of that, and not just the buildings, but also just the earth, the way the earth is, with these what we're also seeing giant trees, we're seeing them as mountains or hills or something. Meanwhile, it's actually the trunk of a giant tree when we're looking at that. So absolutely fascinating. But not just that, but the turn of the century with the incubator babies, all of that, everything is so linked to the Tartaria time. So I would love to hear more from you on your take on all of that, because obviously you do know a heck of a lot about that. So I'd love for you to indulge us.
Well, you can't wipe out a civilization without having to repopulate it afterwards because there's no infrastructure, there's nothing. So there were a series of wars that took place. Perhaps the Napoleonic Wars would be the largest. And the idea there was to remove the majority of the adult population, leaving them with children. And obviously, there were a lot of women left. So what they did was they introduced something called the Lunacy Act. And one of the reasons you could be committed to an asylum was if your husband was killed in battle. So your husband dies in battle, you're left at home with the children, you're then put into an asylum, the children become property of the state. They're given new history, new names, they're distributed across the world, and they know nothing of what happened before and what went before. But that wasn't enough. There weren't enough children to be able to repopulate significantly. And to give you an idea, between 1776 and 1876, 3.5 billion people died. The population that was left was 1.35 billion. So you can see the numbers are incredible. And this is where the remains we find in catacombs come from. So the bodies of those that fell during the wars were actually used as fertilizer. And so in the Napoleonic Wars, for example, the bodies were shipped back to Britain. The skulls and some of the bones were taken and put into catacombs, but the bodies themselves were brought back and used as fertilizer. Some of the bones were crushed and used to make bone china, and the teeth were removed to make dentures. So they really did a number. Not only did they kill people, but they actually indirectly had us or our ancestors eat the remains of those that fell. So you end up
And
with.
recycle and
Mhm.
recycle that which they could. This is the most perverted thing I've heard in my life. I mean, listen, I've heard disgusting things on this channel because I interview a lot of survivors of satanic ritual abuse. And I mean, you can imagine the horror stories that we hear coming out of that. But wow. I mean, okay, so what you're saying, I want to just recap that. When a woman's husband was killed in battle, there were a lot of wars at the time, no doubt contrived wars when we're hearing what it's about. So started by the same people, two different sides again. And then due to women being then left alone, they were able to go legally be put into mental asylums because they couldn't cope for whatever reason. Maybe they were sad or depressed or something, and then they were just put into an asylum. And then these children were redistributed. When we're looking at the orphan trains, etc., at the turn of the from late 1800s into the early 1900s, then is that correct? So
Yeah.
that's when this whole, and then you say they were not all of all they weren't all obviously orphans. So they had to also be created, manufactured, I guess. We'll get into that with the cloning and the Cabbage Patch babies. But then you're also saying that all the remains and stuff in the catacombs, we always seeing pictures of this. And there's a lot of stuff around this that I've seen as well, these skeletons and things. That would obviously then be our dead ancestors, I would imagine, from wars and stuff like that, right? Because hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, men, would specifically would have been killed. Their remains are crushed up to make bone china. Their teeth are used to make dentures. I'm absolutely finished. So this has been going on for the longest time. We've literally been turned into, I want to say, cannibals.
Yeah, yeah, but that's happening today, isn't it? I mean, you can look at the
Yes,
pig, but the pig is a good indication of cannibalism. So yeah, but the
exactly.
women weren't not necessarily put into asylums because they were depressed. That they were put into asylums because they were considered to be unfit without a husband to raise a family. So there were a number of reasons: reading too much, being over religious, even having going through a menstrual cycle. You could be committed for that. They called it women's problems, monthly women's problems. That was another ground for being committed. So they found every reason they could to lock the women up. So most of the men have died. In the Napoleonic Wars, for example, and most of the civil wars, people were fighting themselves. Sorry, I just got a little bit of background noise going on.
No
Um,
worries, no worries.
so yeah, so they actually got people to fight each other, and in the Napoleonic Wars, people actually wrote back, and those that survived said that when the dust settled, they saw that they were fighting people wearing exactly the same uniform. Um, so with as with all wars, they were depopulating and getting rid of architecture that they couldn't explain or justify, and that carried on into the Second World War, and obviously it's been going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine now. So they're still out there actively removing certain architecture. Perhaps the best example would be Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which both places had Tartarian architecture and were still operating using the ether to generate energy. So they flattened those two islands because they were out of place. Two remote islands shouldn't have that tech.
Please carry on speaking, Guy. I'm just gonna put myself on pause here. I've just got someone at the gate. I'll literally be, or do you want me, I think what I'm gonna do is put our recording on pause if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, no problem at all.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry, Guy.
Yes, that's okay. So yeah, so it was very cleverly done. That war is never normally about what we're told it's for. They're never fighting for peace, and we know that the people that finance both sides of the war have an agenda, and they are the same people. It's normally the Rothschilds in one way or another. So yeah, so they got the adult population to kill each other, the men more so. But the people that survived, when they returned, if they didn't comply, then they were sent to prison and to asylums too. Because New World Order began in 1776, everything changed. And if you weren't going to toe the line and follow the new narrative, then you would be sectioned or imprisoned. So what they were left with were children, but not enough to actually create a new infrastructure. So they needed to add to that. So you've got all of these children, they're blank sheets, new name, new identity. They're given new history books, they're taught new things, and they don't know any different. And then along come the Cabbage Patch Babies, and that's where the mass population came from. The orphan trains represented about 500,000 children. Conservatively, people state 250,000, but you can normally double these things. And of course, we were still sending children to Australia until relatively recently. So that's been going on a long time. My mother's father was sent from Ukraine to America with his sister. A lot of children actually came from the stronghold of Tartaria, which is Russia. That's where the majority of the children actually originated from, but they wouldn't know that. These children wouldn't know where they were from. Everything
What
is
about if let's say the descendants of those children, and I'm sure there are quite a few in the world who know they are descendants of the orphan train kids. If they had to do DNA tests, would that not take them back to their roots, like Russia, Tartaria?
yeah, yeah. So if someone was to do their DNA, but bear in mind that the Rothschilds own Ancestry.com. So if you were to do
Mhm.
your DNA through that, and the idea with Ancestry.com is to give people a false family tree. That's the idea of it. And at the same time to capture your DNA, because their biggest, Blackstone's biggest investment is actually bioweaponry. And what they're doing with Ancestry.com is not only giving people a false family tree that answers a few questions they might have, but at the same time, they're looking for specific blood groups and bloodline families. They're looking for people that carry Rh null. and that's the golden blood. That's the bloodline of Jesus, allegedly. So they're looking for specific people that they believe are related to them, and they're also looking for Rh negative, which are the descendants from Atlantis. Tartaria is an echo of Atlantis, really. Atlantis was reformed, if you like, in Tartaria, using the same technology and the same ethos with regard to frequency and vibration and enlightenment. And so, the parasites had now they were on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution, and there was a lot of money to be made from fossil fuel. And but also at the same time, if you can remove free energy and everybody has to go to a certain place to power things or to heat their homes, not only are you making money from it, but you're controlling that energy. So it was about that too. As we see today, we use fiat currency. Money isn't real anymore. These companies, these people don't need money. It's control. It's financially hurting us at points with the cost of living increasing to the extent it has done. And that's pleasurable to them. It keeps us subdued. So a lot of it's to do with control as well. They infiltrated all religions at the same time. Every single religion was hijacked.
Let's go back to what you were saying. 1776 is when the New World Order began. Talk to us on that, please. How did it begin? Maybe give us a little synopsis of what it
Sorry,
was
but dogs.
like.
I've got the same problem. I think there's someone at the door, and my dog's now barking.
Okay, let me pause us. Let me pause
No, no,
us.
that's okay. I'm hoping someone's going to go and take a look for me. But
The Tartarians are flying around us
yeah,
today.
yeah.
Lovely. Okay, what I was saying is, can you take us back to 1776, when what you're saying is when the New World Order began?
Hmm.
Talk to us about what it was like before then and how the takeover began or how it occurred, because that to me is something I find extremely fascinating. I've got my ideas on that, and I would love to hear what you say.
Well, Tartaria was a time of peace. Some people refer to it as the millennial reign of Christ, a period of time where everything worked with cymatics. So buildings were constructed in a way in which they resonated inside at 432 hertz, which gave you a feeling of euphoria, but it also balanced your organs. And church bells were used. Church bells were actually used for several purposes. One of them being to actually control the environment surrounding the building itself, because it was keeping everything at a certain vibration and frequency. This also allowed healthy plant growth. So we saw lots of obviously giant trees, as you mentioned earlier on, but also produce as well. Fruit and veg crops grew to a much greater size, and so did some people. And by changing the environment, by removing the bells, changing the frequency, and interrupting the energy grid, ley lines, in other words, by interrupting that, they were able to damage the the grid, the network that we live on. And since then, everything has been stifled. So before that, it was really a period of enlightenment and harmony, living in balance. Star forts were built, cathedrals were built. These buildings harnessed energy, and they invented the organ, the pipe organ, and you would go into a place that had one, and that would balance your internal organs. The frequency was being used to heal, and people today, excuse me, still use Tesla frequency devices to heal. And that's how it worked. And perhaps one of the biggest players would have been Genghis Khan, who allowed the practice of every religion without fear of persecution or ridicule. And he also introduced the first passport, which guaranteed safe passage for anybody wishing to enter Tartaria and travel. So his role has been completely inverted, and his character. He isn't at
You're
all.
kidding.
No, they've done it with
I
everyone. They even did
I
it with a
want.
famous German during the 1930s and 40s. Everything you know about everyone
Yes.
has been completely inverted.
And
And I,
especially the Second World War as well. Sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
but that's
but
also a story
yeah,
that,
that
yeah,
that man, yeah, the Chancellor is not the person we've been told, and
yeah,
they've done that consistently. You know, the victors always write the history, and Genghis Khan was perhaps the most significant of them all. But Tartaria itself, those buildings that we see, the Greco-Roman style buildings that appear everywhere in every town and city in the world, they were built during that time, and they were built to harness energy. And red brick that's used to normally build what we would today see an old asylum, or an old prison, or an orphanage, and some of the larger buildings with the pillars outside, that red brick will harness energy. They can store electricity. It's the same chemical reaction that causes rust. It's the same process. So these were huge power stations, and the power was distributed, into every home, through cables. And those cables can often be confused as being early telegraph wires. But if you look at some of them, then there are too many to explain that away. There are
yeah.
some streets that have hundreds of these cables. You didn't have hundreds of buildings you could go into to send a telegraph. So they've done that, but they have in some cases Photoshop manipulated photographs, early photographs, so you can see cables running across buildings if you look carefully, but in the sky, where there's a clear image, they are cropped out. So they've tried to remove things, and a lot of early photographs you'll see that the background's often completely blank, just white. It's called vanilla sky, and that is hiding other buildings and also giant trees. So they destroyed absolutely everything. But what we have are some descendants still wandering around and a lot of buildings that are still present. And then you come across someone like Nikola Tesla, who tries to reverse engineer Tartarian technology and obviously is shut down in the process of doing that. So there are remnants of Tartaria, but I always describe it as an echo of Atlantis.
It makes a lot of sense, when you say it like that, because um, sure, there's so much. I mean, there's so much what you said, and I'm trying to think of um, which thread to go with here, but for sure, Genghis Khan. I
Mm,
mean, we have been led to believe that he was probably one of the most prolific uh, warmongers
mm.
that this planet has ever seen, right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is really the opposite. So explain more to us about Genghis Khan, please.
Yeah, so you have to invert everything because everything has been
Yeah.
inverted. So you have to invert it back or revert it. And that's the true of everything. Genghis Khan, there's actually absolutely no evidence to support he was a warmonger at all. Um, why would he have introduced a passport to guarantee safe passage for Europeans wishing to come into Tartaria? Why would he have built a wall to face China to keep people out, if he was so keen to go and slaughter? The Great Wall of China, which is the Great Wall of Tartaria, was built to protect and defend, not attack. So they were peacefaring, peace-loving people, and Marco Polo wrote about this. His book Marco Polo's Travels is worth people reading. I mean, in my first book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, I do actually include quite a bit of his work, so people don't have to go and read his book. The juicy bits I've included. But nobody that actually travelled into Tartary and spent time with Genghis Khan said anything negative about him at all. They saw no signs of warmongering, rape, and pillage. It just didn't happen. But there's also a slightly deeper conspiracy linked to Genghis Khan. Now, his father is called Yeshua, and anybody that understands religion will know that Yeshua is the correct name of Jesus. Now, there, where he is buried is a mound in Ukraine, funnily enough, that they've attempted to flatten, and people still go to this particular mound, and it's covered in wooden crucifixes. And people believe that that is the burial place of Jesus himself. Now, I'm not saying Jesus existed. I don't know. I've no idea. Um, I sit on the fence with it. I've read enough to suggest he didn't. I've read enough to suggest he did. But people still travel to this particular site to place a wooden crucifix, and there are hundreds of them. And they believe that that is where Jesus is buried. They also believe that that's where Genghis Khan's father is buried. Now, we know Jesus spent time in Tibet. And
Yes.
when you look at our timeline's out by 800 years. The year's now 1225. When you actually look at the millennial reign of Christ, the 1,000 year period that he lived for after his rebirth at aged 33, that aligns with the Tartarian Empire. It also aligns with Genghis Khan. So there are people out there that believe that Genghis Khan was a son of Jesus. Now, obviously,
Wow.
I'm an ordained church minister, so I've been looking into the Bible and religion for a very, very long time, and we know that Jesus had daughters. One of them being Sarah Tamar, who's buried in Tamar in Portugal. But we don't know about sons. We know he adopted John the Baptist's sons, but the time spent in Tibet aligns with the birth of Genghis Khan. So there are people that have, joined some dots together
Wow.
there, but it's not something that I'm fully on board with because I haven't researched that enough. But there'll be people out there that will confirm what I'm saying. There'll be people out there that dismiss it, but of course you can't dismiss it because they weren't there. It can't be
Yeah,
dismissed. But at
exactly.
the same time, it can't be proven. So it's something that I'm constantly
Exactly.
researching. But it does align. He was the first person to allow Christianity within what was called now, well, what was then Tartaria, but what is now called Mongolia. He was the first person to allow the practice of Christianity. And the further you dig into him, the further it goes. The hair, the red head and the slightly paler skin, it all sort of aligns if you follow the bloodline back. Everything does seem to tally up. But as I said, it's something that I'm still researching, but it's very, very hard to get information because you've got people that are incredibly brainwashed that won't hear anything that isn't in the Bible, despite the fact it's been badly translated and half of it's missing. They'll still you know, adhere to that. And
Yeah.
there are people out there that are already perhaps a little further than I am into researching it that will confirm that yes, actually that does all align. So yeah, but also Tartaria. I mean, the first person or being, if you like, is that we're talking when we go back to the beginning of Tartaria. We're looking at Gog Magog, um, King Solomon, Gilgamesh. This is the same bloodline that we're talking about here. So it does tally. The last ruler,
Wow.
the last member of royalty, the royal bloodline for Tartaria was Queen Jennifer, and that's who a character in Star Wars called Padme is based upon, who marries Darth Vader before he turns into Darth Vader when he's Anakin Skywalker. And she was executed by the Russians in the 1940s, and that was the last member of that royal lineage. And you can go onto Google and you can actually find photos of her being shot in the back while she was pregnant. They're out there, and people will instantly see when they see her face, they'll see that this is where. And Star Wars is based upon Tartaria. A lot of the buildings, a lot of the characters, and you'll clearly see that this is, the Queen from Star Wars too. So it's out there in plain sight, which is what they do. We know they do that. Um, so
Why did they, I mean, other than for obvious reasons that she was the last of the bloodline, what was the reason for her being executed? Was that the
um,
only reason?
well, she wouldn't comply.
Hmm.
She would not comply. They'd already killed her husband. She would not comply. and she had to be executed because the Second World War was still very much focused on Tartaria, and that's why they did what they did to Dresden because that was still operating as a Tartarian city. So they carpet bombed it, to the point where people were
Carpet bombed it?
carpet bombed. Yeah, so that it
What
was
is
bombed.
that?
It was bombed to the extent so heavily that people literally melted into liquid due to the heat. Uh,
No.
but they did it on the day of a children's festival, Fashing it's called. Now there was no military significance to that city. It was a refugee city. But the Allies even bombed the zoo and gunned down the animals that fled. People jumped into the river to try and save themselves, but spontaneously combusted when they emerged back from the water due to the heat. Um, at the time that was done, Churchill said it was to reduce the morale of the Germans. But if you look at when that actually took place, the war was pretty much over. Just like with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the war was almost at an end. There was no point. There was no military benefit to doing that. So
Yeah.
they were just getting rid of architecture. Obviously, the First World War was started because Germany was the fear was that Germany was going to be a superpower because they were technologically advanced. That was because they were still operating as Tartarian, where everybody else had been,
Wow.
you know, their tech had been removed. In Russia, the Jesuits had bought technology, stolen it, got rid of people that wouldn't share it, and they had gone across the world, infiltrated everywhere. But Germany was the last place to actually surrender, if you like. They refused to stop using the ether energy, and their technology was way more advanced. So Cecil Rhodes created a group called the Society of the Elect. It was backed by the Rothschilds, and their task was to stop Germany, to reduce it to rubble, and to kill every single citizen. And there was a famous quote that at the time, the only good German is a dead one. So they wanted to completely remove Germany from the face of the earth because they refused to comply, and that's what it was all about. And nothing's changed. It's still going on today. Just look at 9/11. The whole reason behind that was because somebody had found, an archaeologist called Fassbender had found Gilgamesh's tomb. So they needed a reason to bomb the site. And so we had this whole fake attack on the Twin Towers, and then targeted the exact site where his tomb was, and then looted the museums and took everything they could. So they're still doing it right now. If there's information out there that can alter the narrative or make people question our origins and understand we've been lied to and confirm that, then it has to be removed. And as I said, they're still doing it today.
I've never stopped. Exactly. I mean, I find it very interesting. And just to reverse a little bit, because not too long ago, I was watching, and in fact, we did a commentary on the series, The Greatest Untold Story of Adolf Hitler, I think it's called. It was maybe 12 or 13, 15 or 20-minute segments of, the Second World War. Super interesting because in that you see how the Allies and the UK and the US actually collude, and of course with Russia actually against Germany. But you see at the Second World War how Hitler has already rebuilt Germany. And for me, that was always a very interesting thing because I've read a lot or researched a lot about the Germans using what they call the Vril energy. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with the term? Okay, so I was researching that, wondering about that, because of course the swastika looks like the Hindu symbol of peace and goodwill, except it's turned to an angle. So obviously, there's a lot of rumor that's gone around. They went to the Himalayan masters. They accessed the energy there. They were even measuring the Tibetan kids' skulls as the perfect Aryan race, etc., etc. So it always made me wonder that part of it. Were they actually making use of the Vril energy, but which of course is the Vritya energy in the Himalayan or the Hindu terms, which is the complete opposite of what the Nazis were using it for, right? So they took that life force and inverted it and obviously did horrific things with it. But now I'm wondering, was it Tartaria? What I mean, how does the Vril? I'm fascinated by this. This is amazing. I'm loving having this conversation because for me is a mystery. How the Germans access that, because you could see those allies were super jealous. They were so pissed off that Germany was able to build these things, etc., etc., after the Second World War. They just wanted that technology, information, and they got it. But then, of course, right after that, Operation Paperclip occurs after the Second World War with all the Nazis, and then all these disgusting MK Ultra programs start. It's kind of like all in. Okay, let's go back to what energy were the Germans then using, and where does the Vril energy come into this?
Right. Well, first of all, everything you know about him is a lie.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah, the war criminals from the Second World War. I mean, the biggest one would have to be Winston Churchill. And
Totally.
so obviously, you've looked into it, so you can see what Adolf Rothschild was doing. He was trying to rebuild the infrastructure. He had found out he was an illegitimate son of the Rothschilds. They were crippling the economy, so he shut their bank down. The price that he paid for that was the invasion when Poland invaded Germany, which I have a newspaper, a very old, obviously, newspaper that shows you Poland invades Germany. And he was trying to rebuild the economy, and people were having to go into camps because the Allies had cut off, after the First World War, had really much cut off the supply lines. So people were starving. They were starving to death. And so they built camps where these people could go into, and they were looked after. And it's quite ironic because if I follow my family history and the stories I've been told, my mother's Jewish, and we had relatives that allegedly were in those camps. And what happened was very different to what we were told. Auschwitz would be a good
Yes,
example of that. Ice
yes,
rink, theatre, cinema, library. These people were being starved to death by the Allies following the
yes,
treaty. Um, so,
yes,
so what they were doing, so what Hitler was looking for was the people that carried the information that went back from through Atlantis into Tartaria, Hyperborea, and to that current time. The Aryans, Aryan means lordly. These were lordly people. These were divine priests. So it wasn't anything
yes.
about trying to repopulate with certain people. He was trying to find the Aryan people to help him harness the energy and work with this sort of technology that has been removed from our history books. And this is where the vril comes into it and fuel society. Um, and this is when they were taken to the last, if you like, the last remaining civilization of, or sorry, the last two remaining civilizations. Obviously, they go to Shambhala, and they're going to Antarctica to find, a direct access point into the inner Earth where people had fled from the floods before. So that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to find the people that had survived and stayed on the surface, and these were the Aryans, which they're actually Syrian, and it's Syrian for lordly. So these were divine priests that had the knowledge. That's what they were looking for. Himmler was, it was his life's mission to find that information.
Wow.
They got the information, and then they created the bell, which was this flying saucer. And you can imagine the rest of the world is concerned that this is a superpower, and these people are going to take over the world. What they were trying to do was restore it. They were trying to get things back to how they were supposed to be. And, a few greedy people out there didn't want that. So they set to us killing each other to prevent that from happening. And then that's when the propaganda started. Um, so yeah, it's quite interesting, and it's a weird conversation within my family, because obviously my mother's side being Jewish, it's a weird conversation to have, because some people won't accept it. But I've had his Adolf Rothschild's first speeches correctly translated, and they are completely different to what I was taught at school. This is he's talking about freeing the world from the financial constraints
Mhm.
of people
Mhm.
from certain bloodline families like the Rothschilds, freeing people that are trapped within the British Empire that have been treated as slaves. It's completely different, and that has been inverted. And then of course you've got Operation Paperclip, where they rounded up the scientists like Warner von Braun, and this was all done by the Americans. The Americans
Mhm.
organised Operation Paperclip, and it was they
Totally.
they were given an option. They were either going to be executed or they would go and work for them. And Warner von Braun, as he said before he died, that there will, he said that there will be a terrorist attack, there'll be a pandemic, there'll be a fake alien invasion. He actually said exactly what their plans were, and he gave all the information to his secretary, who then put it out there in the public domain. So, on his deathbed, he tried to warn everyone of what they were doing. And so, yeah, so that these Nazi scientists that did all of these horrible things, it's very questionable that took place, because everything else has been falsified and inverted. But yeah, a gun to the head, and one to the family as well, and told that they would be executed unless they went to America and shared their research. And America wanted them because they didn't want Russia to have them. Better that they had these
Exactly.
scientists, and better they had this information than these people were just killed. They wanted the technology that Germany had.
Totally.
Mm.
Totally. That's it. In that documentary, you see after the World War ends, uh, literal footage of the Allies talking, and the next minute, whoop, whatever type of aeroplane flies past. They've never seen something so fast before. And then they obviously realize then that the Allies have taken the technology, and Russia, because from what I was recall there, Russia and the Allies basically were going to split the German scientists,
Yeah.
and they were going to take, Russia was going to take some and Germany was going to take the others, but the Allies took, sorry, not Germany, the Allies took all the space technology.
Hmm.
And that's what the Russians wanted. So
Yeah.
I find it very, very, very interesting, because that would most certainly be an incredibly interesting rabbit hole to dive
Mm.
down as well, and to discuss like the intricacies of that, because what you're saying makes such perfect sense, and you're giving me pieces of the puzzle, because there have definitely been things that I've put together in my own head. It's a game of connect the dots at this point. My intuition is shouting about certain things.
Mm.
Um, but like what you're talking about, just the energy and the area and what they were actually looking for. As you say, the enlightened race that could help them literally, obviously, because that's what, when we're looking at the monks, that's literally what the monks do, because they create that space of peace and harmony
Mm.
and bliss through their meditation. They are able to bring in that energy into the earth through their
Mm.
bodies. They're like portals for the divine energy. And that's what most people don't realize about what the monks do. That's why they sit and meditate for 2 weeks or 2 days or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, right? Literally to bring in that energy. So they were looking for certain, I guess, gifted kids, or people like kids. I mean, when we look at the torture that they've been doing to kids, on these in these projects, kids obviously would be something they would have been looking for in terms of gifts, spiritual gifts. What do you think?
Yeah, that goes on today, doesn't it? But I think that
Yeah,
that they're easier to manipulate, more malleable. Um,
yeah.
and Yeah, but I mean, there are also links, of course, to there being rituals taking place that involve children. I mean, you know, that was
Mm,
Putin's argument with, with Ukraine. We're losing 500,000 children across the border. Where are they going? And the moment he starts probing, NATO gets involved, and then and then we end up where we are now. So children have been used for lots of different reasons, but of course there are links to adrenochrome
of
and
course.
yes, and obviously the blood transfusion of a young child that has released their adrenaline, and
Hmm.
people parasites using it for healing, for well-being, and also because they believe,
To stay young and
yeah, they
wrinkle
don't.
free.
Yeah, they don't want to face their maker. They're scared of dying
Mm,
because they know that
mm.
they have lied, and although they put information out there in plain sight, but they hide it within works of fiction and movies that are science fiction, because they've
Totally.
tricked and deceived. They do fear dying, so I think they'll do whatever it takes to prolong their life and avoid that, meeting their maker, so to speak. So yeah,
Yeah.
children will always be part of that. I mean, when in 2012, when it all happened, originally happened with Ukraine, and people were finding in these bioweapon facilities just skips full of children's bodies, and they'd all been experimented on, and obviously, you know, died as a direct result of that. But Putin appears to have been, I don't know if he's now been replaced. A lot of people say he has, but he was actually trying to rewrite history and correct everything, and that's why, within their churches, and Putin has been showing these images too, that they portray Jesus as being dark. Well, of course he would be. You can't walk around the Middle East with pale skin. It's
I
pretty
always say that.
obvious.
I
It's
mean, look,
absolutely
I mean,
ridiculous.
I, I've got a pale skin, and let me tell you something. I spent time in the Middle East, and rest assured, you there's a reason why people in the Middle East have got dark skin
Mm,
complexion, because I'll tell you something, this lily white skin of mine does not fare well in that harsh sun. That's for sure.
yeah.
I've said that all along. Of course, I mean, the greatest deception, one of the greatest deceptions, is that Jesus was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, gorgeous man. That was, who was the artist? It was the lover of one of the famous artists. Is it Michelangelo? One of the
Well,
artists. He
yeah.
is well known for drawing. Is it Michelangelo?
I can't remember who it is, but Michelangelo, yeah, that's actually a family. It wasn't the one person, so even that's a lie.
Yeah.
But um, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they've changed it all. I mean, if you followed that particular bloodline, then he would have been dark skinned and red haired. Um, but Caucasians, as I appear, we're relative newcomers. We've only been around a few hundred years. Before that, there were no Caucasians.
Yeah.
They repopulated using this kind of skin tone to whitewash. They completely whitewashed history, and well, they discredited anybody that wasn't Caucasian. And in some cases, even in the World's Fairs and expositions, they would put, indigenous people on display and describe them as
Make them
savage and
seem,
primitive when they
yeah,
weren't. They were far more advanced than we are. So,
totally.
so I think that,
Totally.
they have whitewashed history and
It's
brainwashed.
so true. It's so true what you're saying, because if you just look, one thing I wanted to ask you as well is like going back to, wow, like the 1400s somewhere. We're seeing also in these beautiful Tartarian type star forts buildings,
Mm,
there are African and Caucasian beings cohabiting, right? And there's actually African kings. and white Caucasian people are bowing down to the African kings. These are like the photographs taken from back, I think it was the Congo, what is now the Congo, DRC. Um, and the most incredible universities, the most incredible books, the most incredible
Mm,
waterways that were built. And it's true. I do believe that the original population of Earth was dark skinned, had to have been. And then, of
mm,
course, as we migrated to different parts of the Earth, so we also adjusted to the or the climate, I guess, yeah. Like, I mean, in Africa as well, with a lot of sun, obviously more dark-skinned people here, right? But then as we migrated here, as the Caucasians migrated here, what, 400 years ago now, we've also adapted because, when we look at the South African, the white South African, we're a combination of our strongest ancestors who survived because our ancestors came here from Europe and all places. Many of them never survived because they couldn't handle the heat and the desert and all of that as well. So we are a combination of, yes, the Europeans, but it's the strongest that have survived. But there's been a lot of integrating with the African tribes as well, you know. So although we're not seen as mixed race or whatever, but it's kind of like a culture on its own. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a
yeah,
population. We kind
yeah.
of breed a species on our own, which is very interesting because that just sort of, again, takes me to what we were saying about as we migrated to different parts of the world, we learned different skills. We learned, to survive in different areas, but ultimately, the essence of energy would always be the same. So the wise people then would have then built these beautiful energy harnessing buildings and star forts and riverways, etc., because they knew exactly how to work with nature, right?
Hmm.
And harness it in that way. And until what you're saying, 1776 then. Um,
Yeah.
what happened then? Was that when the Rothschilds? What was actually taking place in 1776 that the New World Order started taking over?
Well, it's the 4th of July, 1776
Right.
is obviously the yeah, yeah, the Declaration of Independence. And if
Yes.
anybody wants to have a look at the reverse of the American dollar bill, it says on there 1776 New World Order. And the Statue of Liberty, which shows you Lucifer breaking free of his chains,
Yes.
which obviously Lucifer and Jesus are the same person,
Yeah.
that actually has the M out of alignment. Because our timeline is wrong, because we're in 1225 now, they've had to add ones or M's to buildings and statues over the last sort of 200 or 300 years. So that shows the start of New World Order, which we're in now, and that should peak. I mean, we should expect something significant to happen on the 4th of July next year because that will mark 250 years since it began. So it was New World Order, and the New World Order was designed to really bring in the Industrial Revolution and control. So they'd already got through to all of the religions, altered the Bible, infiltrated everything, and had actually, in some cases, got people actually doing satanic things and worshipping the wrong gods for fun. And so they were brainwashed. And then we had the education system come along where people are taught how to work for one of their friends or taught how to prepare themselves to go and join the armed forces. But really, the Industrial Revolution was the significant factor behind New World Order, the implementation of the fossil fueled power. And if you
And
look at
isn't that,
images, sorry,
yeah, carry on?
if you look at images from the Industrial Revolution, you'll only see children working. You won't see any adults, and
Yes.
that's because there weren't any. There were adults, but nothing like there were the number of children. If all the children are working in the mines, on the farms, and in the factories, where are the adults? Where are they working? Well, they're not, because there weren't any. And if you look at early photographs, if you just go onto Google and type in St. Petersburg, 1800s, empty streets, you'll see that there
Yes,
is nobody there. There is no one.
yes,
All across the world, the
yes.
majority of people had been removed and they were replaced with Caucasian babies. The Cabbage Patch babies are Caucasian. They wanted to repopulate using Caucasian babies. And Benjamin Franklin himself said this, that they wanted to have more Caucasian people present. Taking over people's land, removing their religion and their history and their culture, and Caucasian people living in places they have no right to be. And it's interesting what you said about the royal families, because the Ethiopian royal family were the only people on the planet the Queen of England would bow to, because she knew the truth. She's no royal family. She had no right to sit on a throne, but they do,
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
she knew that.
And isn't it interesting that Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was not colonized?
Mm,
And that when you're looking at the original Bible is actually the Ethiopian Bible.
yes, I've got it.
So, yeah, so that's actually where the truth sits. And it's so true what you're talking about Africa. And when you're talking to me about the Cabbage Patch Kids being the Caucasian kids to repopulate the world so that the Caucasians became more powerful. Oh my God, it makes perfect
Mm,
sense.
mm,
This is exactly what it
yeah.
is.
What I'm trying to do here is cram in 5 years worth of research into an hour. But my first book, which is I've got the paperback. That's the one that most people sort of know me for. That's being turned
Tesla and the
into a
Cabbage Patch Kids.
that's being made into a documentary actually in the new year. But that's where people need to go to get it all, because I'm trying to sort of cram as much in as I can, and it's quite difficult to do that. Um, because
Absolutely.
the process was incredibly complicated, and it took a very long time to pull it off. So they introduced these babies into world's fairs. They went through baby farms like a sort of hub distribution center. But the world's fairs were where you could actually see these babies on display and buy them. In France, you could win a baby in a raffle. They were advertising them for sale on postcards, and they were encouraging people across the world to buy as many as possible, to go and work on their farms or down their coal mines. And that was all reinforced when the doll came out in the 80s, called the Cabbage Patch Doll. The story with that one, the backstory they came up with as a marketing strategy is all about children being grown, and if they weren't found parents that would adopt them, they would have to go and work down the mine, and that's why children are called miners. Our language has been played with. Children were sent down the mines. They are miners, and everything has been twisted. And as I keep saying, it's very clever. I mean, it is incredibly clever how they did this. But this was the Rothschilds' find. The Vatican was on its knees. The Rothschilds bailed them out on the condition that the Jesuits would go out there and remove everything. Information changed hands. People were killed and silenced. And they still have that information today. So, the Rothschilds and their friends still have all of the technology that goes back to Atlantis, and they slowly release bits of it once they've perfected it. And here we are today with the wrong technology, the wrong frequencies. We're all damaging ourselves with EMFs. They've poisoned our water supply, our food chain, and it's all to do with keeping us subdued and attacking our pineal gland, so we can't have that connection, that connection. And I think some of us, the ones that are awake, that connection's stronger.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Mm,
It's very possible to have that connection once you've overcome, once your spirit is stronger. Because at the end of the day, when we reconnect spiritually, there's nothing more powerful than the heart chakra.
mm,
And
mm.
that will dissolve anything. So we really just have to get back to love because that's going to elevate our consciousness, but it's a
Yes.
journey to get there. It's a journey because so many people, and when we're looking at how they've used religion
Mm,
to absolutely subdue, divide, conquer everybody. I mean, I would have thought that after the jab in 2020, sufficient people would have understood just by looking at how many people are being unalived. And suddenly, I mean, the last research I did, that was a while ago, about a year ago, 20 million worldwide, and being died suddenly. And people, a lot of people have started asking questions, but a lot haven't. That's the
mm,
scary part. They're still seeing, oh, my health is like not serious. But it's like, if you think they're doing that to us as a population, if there's enough evidence that this thing is, well, they will say, well, it was an experimental thing. But there's enough evidence out there for everyone in the world to see how damaging and what literally the intention of this was. That's just the final big, massive push that they did, right?
yeah.
And people are either tumbling over the edge now or they're actually waking up and learning. They
Mm,
say, okay, well, maybe I can fly. I don't have to fall, I can fly. And I
mm,
think that might be the good thing because a lot of people are realizing they can fly. They don't need to be in this constricted environment where
mm,
I know, like, I think the good that that's done afterwards has been a lot of people are no longer controlled. I don't know what it's like with you guys, but here, a lot of people have decentralized, not working in the corporate environment anymore, or working from home. So spending more time with families, etc., etc. A lot of people decentralizing. I live in a holiday area. In the last 5 years, I cannot tell you how this place has grown. Annoying for me, but happy for them. I guess I've got to learn to share. But, so I'm seeing more and more of that trend. But also by the same token, there's the trend where the trend such disconnectedness, just phones, technology, AI, and I think AI is a good thing. Hey, I like using AI to a point. AI refines things well, that for me, but I will do the majority of the work. And then I'll get AI to refine what I needed to refine. But other people will go put that in and spews out something, and that becomes where we're going in a soulless society, sort of back to where we don't want to be. And that is why I think these conversations are so important because we can realize where we need to go back to. And I agree with what you were saying right in the beginning. Well, I don't know if what you're saying was fact, but that I think this is after the 1,000 years of peace. And that's why the Mayan calendars and all the other calendars don't actually, they say, well, after 2012, we don't know anymore. There is no record really because it's up to you guys now, Earthlings. You guys have got to figure out the shit that you needed to figure out with. In my opinion, Jesus has already been here. He gave us all the tools we needed to save us. We are here to save ourselves. Your body is your spaceship. Your body holds all the frequency that you need to elevate your consciousness to a higher level that's literally going to take us out of here. Doesn't necessarily have to be physically running around. It's
mm,
just on a dimension of consciousness. I don't know. What
mm.
is your take on all of that? I know I feel like I've been babbling.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing is that people, I mean, as I said about Jesus earlier on, it's so difficult because, having studied this so deeply, all I see is the story of Horus.
Mm.
The
Mm.
story of Jesus or Yeshua is repeated through so many cultures. I think there are
Yeah.
200 different versions that are a lot
Yes.
older. We know that the Old Testament's nefarious. It's a
Totally.
jealous God that is there's sacrifice in there. It's a completely different God to the one in the New Testament. I think they just glued two books together. The Old Testament appears to be based upon the Sumerian text, the story of the flood and everything. Obviously, it's 2,000 years older. but it's the same story. So I think that it's been nefarious from the start, but the message of prophets that have appeared is always the same one, and that it is love that really is the answer to everything. And I
Mm,
think people will fight for a number of reasons, but love would be the most powerful.
mm.
But also, we've got a problem where a lot of people have Stockholm syndrome. That they despise their captors, the people that keep us as debt slaves. They despise, but they're the same people they go running to for help. And people often
Exactly.
comment on my posts, and they'll say, "Well, this is all really frightening, and it's another thing I wasn't aware of, and I'm really scared. What do we do about it? You know, who's going to help us?" And I always say the same thing. You have to help yourself. Stop looking for someone to come and save you. You have the answers within you, but you're waiting for someone to come and pick up the pieces and do the work for you. That isn't how it's going
Exactly.
to play out. You have to do this
Exactly.
yourself. You've got to wake up. You've got to understand your potential and what you're capable of, and then go out there and help other people that are waking up. Stop looking for someone to come and
Absolutely.
save you all the time. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly. No, it's not. It's like, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but it's like, I laugh. I don't laugh. It's like I say to people, Jesus is not coming to save you.
No.
Just like the Pleiadians are not coming to send a spaceship to save you. It's the same thing.
Mm,
Um, your body is your spaceship. You have to learn how to operate this incredibly intelligent vehicle because it is your soul in physical form,
mm,
right? So you've got to tune in so nicely. When you start speaking the language of your body, it's going to take you to places a spaceship never even could dream of, and you won't
mm.
even know you've gone there.
Mm,
Right? That's the beauty about the intelligence of who we are. We are creative masters. We really are creative geniuses. That's why we're being targeted. But at the end of the day, we've also agreed to come through this process. We're not victims. When we're listening to all these secret space program survivors, human beings are the worst out there. We
mm,
commit the worst crimes against other nation or species, nations, whatever. We are terrible when it comes to cruelty and brutality and greed. We've got, I believe, Guy, as a human being, we have God's full consciousness within every cell of our body. And that can go either way. You can choose it for good or you can choose it for evil. We live in the realm of free will and choice. So you get to choose every moment of every day. What do I do today? How do I use my energy today? Or in whichever way I see fit. And that's where the choice lies.
mm,
So I think we need to start making a lot smarter choices. We've got to realize that this disconnection that we all seem to so many of us seem to find ourselves in, that lulls us. It numbs the brain, it numbs the nervous system, numbs the emotion, it numbs everything, and then we become compliant.
mm.
Very, 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 very interesting. There was just one thing I wanted to point out, just actually mention when you were speaking about Werner von Braun earlier on. Um, Now, I don't know if you know, there's a YouTuber, he calls himself Flat Earth, Tyler the Fittest Flat Earther or something. I've actually watched quite a few of his stuff, and he's actually really, really, really good at he matches faces, like the older faces with new, and you can see exactly features who are the same kind of, and that's a story I know I'd love to have with you on another day about the
Mm,
clones and how they do all of these things. But that's just one thing I wanted to bring in here because what I saw, Werner von Braun and Elon Musk actually match very, very well. And like, I mean, they'll take twins and you can match twins' faces.
mm,
Okay. You're never going to get the same. But when you see a lot of these celebrities' faces and they literally are some kind of a
yeah.
recycled version of who they were before. I have no idea how that works. That's another confusion for
Mm,
me. But you're seeing Werner von Braun, and I'm sure it's him. I could be wrong, but I'm 99% sure it's him. And Elon Musk actually taking on the same Vessel, vehicle. What's your take on that?
I haven't heard that one. All I know is that
Okay,
Warner von Braun wrote a book about a boy called
right.
Elon that travels to Mars and colonizes it. So there is a connection between Elon Musk and Warner von Braun's work, in the same way there is in Ingersoll Lockwood's work about the last president and the adventures of Baron Trump and so on. So I think these things are out there. I think they follow a pattern. Maybe they're reincarnating. Maybe they're using cloned
Yes.
bodies to have another go. Um, but I do think that they're following a script that's been written a very long time ago. But I'll have a look
I
into that.
think
I'll make a note of that one.
I'll actually try and get you that clip, and I'll send it to you. I'd love to hear your take on that. But speaking to also some of the survivors, especially the Montauk survivors,
Yeah,
um, there's a lot of the stuff that's been debunked is literally through the survivors we're speaking to. Are That's real. And there's a
mm,
lot of timeline travel that they do. So they'll go back, they timeline hop. And that's what they're getting a lot of the kids to do. This, in my opinion, is why they're torturing kids, is because they're getting kids uh, in these states of um, astral projection or whatever the gift of the kids is, that they're getting them to change, get things, look at things, etc. So it would make sense to me. And I've also heard about Baron Trump, that he was coming from some bloodline, and literally has been chosen to reincarnate now. And he's got super duper DNA apparently, super amped up DNA.
yeah. They're
That's
Rothschilds. The Trumps
Yeah.
are Rothschilds. Yeah, they all are.
All
But
right.
if you look into Trump when he was bankrupt, if you do a little digging on that,
Yes.
it was the
Yeah,
Rothschilds that bailed him
Rothschild.
out.
The Rothschild bailed him out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he's. I think it's
Is
his
that
mother's side that are Rothschilds.
Wow? But definitely and also, when you look at Trump and The Simpsons and all that predictive
Mm,
programming they've been giving us over the years, about often said Trump was going to be president. So there had to
yeah.
be something in that, right?
Yeah,
There had
Matt
to be
Groening's
something
following
in
a
that.
script. I mean, he's a high-ranking Freemason. He's a 33rd degree Freemason. He's part of the club, and his job
Yeah.
was to put the information out there in plain sight because they are scared of this karmic retribution. They want to make sure that they have
Mm,
told the truth, never lied, and that's why some of these politicians won't give you a straight answer because they can't lie. So what they'll do is they'll trick instead or misdirect. And that was the
mm.
work of Matt Groening, was to actually put a lot of the information out there, but in a way in which you would dismiss it. But there are a lot. I've actually written a chapter on the Simpsons in my latest book. There is a chapter on that, so I won't spoil it, but it goes a little bit deeper than people realise.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to check that out, because also Jessie Zabota was one of my guests, and she was originally trained to be the Queen Mother of Darkness. And we've done a lot of the decodes on that, and also how they use, in these programs, like they would use kids in the Voice of God project, Star Wars now, and is the Looking Glass. So that was hers, the one, and I know there are different ones, but she was actually in the system with Elon Musk. She trained with Elon Musk. They were kids in the same circle, and with one or two of the Rothschilds as well, and her training partner, who's Lucian Greaves, who's now head of the Satanic Church. So she would tell us how these kids would get together in the different programs, and they all needed to see things coherently. So the one would need to see what was going on and the potential outcome, or the possible outcome, and what was going to be the most likely outcome of an event. And then they literally gear things they orchestrate things globally in a mass way to gear it to create that event. Now,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, these guys are they energy masters. We know this, and if anyone knows how energy works, you're going to know. Like, let's say they put it out there, Trump for president in 2022. Now, when 22 billion people are watching The Simpsons, right, within a week, and everyone thinks Trump is president in 2022, you create that. The
Yes,
the
you create the
tide
reality.
takes you
Mm,
there. Yes, they manifest through us.
that's
That's
right.
how they
Mm,
manifest through us. They use us to manifest their reality
mm,
because they or their desires because they can't do it. So we've got to be so aware what we watch, what we get hooked into, what
mm,
we get all caught up in. That's for sure. It's
mm.
very, very interesting. Wow. Hmm. Guy, I think we could have, I mean, I could certainly have a conversation with you for the next 10 hours, but I think for today, I will say thank you. And I would love to invite you back for further shows where we can talk about, definitely we get more into the cloning,
Mm.
also the kids, the Cabbage Patch Kids, and just sort of maybe take a couple more directions, if you're good
Yeah,
with
sure.
that, and just see.
Yeah,
That'll
yeah,
be
that'd be wonderful.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And in closing, is there anything you would like to maybe just say to our guests in closing? And again, if there's anywhere that our guests can see you, your channel, what shows are you on? I know I will put all your links and stuff, but you're welcome just to um,
Yeah, yeah,
repeat
sure.
them. Yeah.
I think that I think that what the information I put out there is to help people go on and explore these conspiracies further. And it's important now, I think, more so than ever before, to not take anything as the truth. We know that we're lied to. We know that some information and some rabbit holes we're sent down are misdirection. So my hope is that my work gives people enough to go on and find out for themselves if there's something that resonates with them. I've given them enough information to start that journey. And so I guess question everything. I would also say that now is the time to turn the television off. If you haven't already turned the TV and
Mm,
the radio off, you need to do it now. We've got a pandemic on the horizon for next spring. Um, we've got to be careful because a lot of people are going to fall for it again, and things are going to get a lot harder before they get better. But I think ultimately what you said about love being the answer to everything is really all that matters in the end. And that's the one thing that these parasites can't do. They're very low vibrational, and love is
mm.
perhaps the most powerful weapon that we have. But if people want to find out more about the next pandemic or about my work or about The Simpsons or who the Antichrist is, anything like that, and obviously Tartarian cloning, jump on my website because they might find my blog interesting. They can get signed copies of my books. They're also on Amazon, but they can also reach out to me if they're if they've got any questions, they can reach out. So my website is the best place to find more information and get hold of a book if you want to.
Did you give us the name of your website?
It is
What is the name?
it's called the Tartarian Empire .co.uk.
The Tartarian Empire.co.uk.
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic. We're gonna link that as well in the description and everything related to what you're saying. So thank you again. I
pleasure.
appreciate you very much, and I look forward to having you back.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and I look forward to doing it
Yeah,
again.
that indeed we shall do. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. What a great conversation. And I definitely look forward to many more of these in the future because this is really where the secrets lie. You know, I mean, you've given me some golden nuggets to take home here today. Just one or two little, more than one or two, just little pieces of the puzzle that just go Ka-ching.
Yeah,
There it is. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for
pleasure,
the work you do to put this
pleasure.
out for all of us who are searching for these answers. Great to find you. Thank you,
Thank
Guy.
you.
Take good
Thank
care.
you. And you. And you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care, everybody. Mwah. God bless you all, and I'll see you next time. Stay cool, stay calm, and just be as charming as ever. Bye.